Man, I really love YouTube. Not just the excellent user and content creator that comprises its user base, but also the fact that, as a company, I can be rest assured that they will never do anything to invade my privacy. I can click on, comment on, and do whatever I want on this website without ever having to worry about the fact that they might use this to invade what I consider to be my personal space. How do I know that? Because they haven't said they've done it. There are two main issues that I really have, and they extend even beyond the online realm. One is the complete lack of standards people ever have when it comes to any kind of real issue and the posturing and sanctimony that comes as a consequence of it. And then the other problem is just the blind fanboy devotion people have towards factions or ideologies or people in particular groups that they somehow become enamored with because they said one thing that kind of made sense and they decided ever since then that they're prophets and godsends. My first issue, let's get right to it. I had some friends a couple of years back that decided to boycott a restaurant because they made a statement that they didn't like, even though they could have looked at their mission statement, their values, virtues on their website or in their store. They could have even looked at news articles that talked about the various social and political causes that they contributed to and easily deduced that it might not be a great idea to spend your money at a place like this because they don't have the same agreements. No, they decide to wait until the person makes a public official statement saying something that they don't like, and then they want to go and jump on the sanctimony high horse, claiming that, oh well, I can't believe that these people they're not progressive at all. They're so behind the times, and what do they think this is? It's 2013. We shouldn't be doing this. And then they go and they transition their $15,000 a year salaries to another fast food company, instead deciding that that might be more worth their money, even though if you were to look at it, they have the same background, the same history, and perhaps the same sense of values that the other company they boycotted did. And in fact, they've been in the news, and there's even a video on this channel that specifically talks about said update, an article where somebody was removed from the store and was part of a group that they would easily go and pile down and say, well, I can't believe that they wouldn't support a group like that. And yet somehow I can assure you that they're still contributing their meager paychecks to the growth of some corporation that doesn't need any more funds than they already have. And somehow they think they're heroes and they understand and they're much better at things, and they're much better than I am, simply because they want to go and give their money to somebody else who could be doing something also morally reprehensible, but they're just not talking about it, so it's okay. I feel like part of the reason this happens is because these people will go find content creators and they'll say one thing that they agree with, and they'll feel like, oh, that person said the exact words, the words came right out of my mouth, and so they'll follow or they'll subscribe to this person, and so everything that person says there and after, they'll decide, oh well, they get me, so that's the exact same thing, so they'll regurgitate the same statements, the same narrative. And so when one of them makes a video and they manufacture some outrage about some fairly innocuous thing, then their followers will follow suit and decide that, oh, well, I'm going to make a statement, even though I'm sure the only statement that the majority of these gargantuan land masses ever understand or ever have seen come from their cardiologists. So what really bothers me about this is that it makes having a sense of humor all there's only one sense of humor now that can ever happen. There's only one ideology that's allowed. You get the issue that I mentioned in the fandom pain, where people can only have one opinion, and that is the only allowable opinion ever. And worst of all, in my opinion, what this leads to is the bastions of mediocrity that are Shoe on Head, Undoomed, and others being called talented for saying something that is not insightful, it's not clever, and at this point, it's overused. There is fairly little insight from any of these channels, and ignoring whatever possible entertainment value could come out of this. The fact of the matter is that you could realistically go to anybody's channel and find something like this. The real reason that I think a lot of these people are popular have nothing at all to do with the statements that they're making so much as their charisma or some other emotional characteristic, despite the fact that everybody's always posturing about how they're all about reals and they don't understand feels at all, and they only make logical and reasonable decisions, which comes to my next problem. Whenever people talk about logic and reason, I always get furious because I know whatever I'm going to hear is going to be absolutely ridiculous. Anybody who's been on this channel for a couple of months has probably seen the top 5 worst or dumbest things of 2015, and they probably remember this excerpt from number 2 on male suicide.
Studies and articles show that while seeking mental health assistance for men is less common, there are resources that they do not take advantage of and instead resort to self-medicating through substance abuse. And while there is a stigma associated with mental health issues, there is a severe lack in people stepping up to find a solution. These people also take the moral high ground, acting as though they care so much for their fellow man, yet don't do anything to directly help the issue. When was the last time you donated to a cause? Why aren't you going into the mental health field? Much like we tell women to skip the gender studies degrees if they want more women in tech, perhaps it's time to be the change you want to see and opt to research mental health issues in regards to men.
Now, when Scratchpoint made that video and he talked about male suicide in particular to me, I decided to go and look up the issue, look up peer-reviewed articles, because I figured, given everything I've seen, they're probably the first place to start in terms of credibility. So I happened to find some studies, and I gave him some studies to look at and read over to either confirm, affirm, or deny or reject his opinion on the male suicide rhetoric. Well, it turned out to be that the studies were really talking about the issues of why male suicide happens. In fact, they talked about the difficulties of actually researching it. But I did this and I made sure that he had studies on hand specifically because I knew what was going to follow. I knew that the anti-sjw community was going to come out of the woodwork and automatically start finding something to be critical about because it didn't follow the traditional narrative on male suicide. And it absolutely floored me that somebody can look at peer-reviewed articles written by male psychology PhDs exclusively on male suicide and invalidate those as opinion pieces versus blog articles on Psychology Today. I will never understand how something that has actual data, pages of citations and references, somehow loses credibility over something that can easily just be posted and have minimal references and citations. But I figured that would happen, so that was why I brought it. So I say that also to say that many times when I get involved in conversations, I'm usually looking up or researching the topic at hand before I engage people on YouTube comments or before I make videos or before I write articles, because I want to make sure that I've covered all my bases. Even if I have an opinion and I find an article that doesn't affirm my opinion, I still want to look at it because I want to be able to consider all avenues. It never fails that on either side of the equation, whether you're a social justice idiot or you're an anti-social justice idiot, somebody will come along and they'll either say you don't understand, they'll talk about logic and reason and free thinking and rational thought, and you will provide them with articles, and rather than looking at them, considering the validity of them, and then either arguing in spite of them or changing your opinion, instead the most convenient thing to do is ignore them and find ways to make up some arbitrary fallacy that doesn't exist. And while we're on the subject of manufactured fantasy things, anything like Shoe on Head's law and Sargon's law are also stupid. They don't exist, and you need to stop using them. There were things that already existed for one of those, and the other hasn't even been scientifically proven. So if you toolboxes want to go spend your time posturing about how scientific you are and how logical and reasonable you are, even though you don't understand the difference between a proposition and a conjecture, and you don't understand the values of having conjectures in science, because most of you idiots say, well, if it doesn't have evidence, then it can be dismissed. dismissed. Yeah, I'm sure Goldbach and Godel would have loved to have heard that when they spent their life's work trying to prove something, and the people that follow them, their students and their students who continue to research the topic, would love to have been told that, well, whatever you're studying isn't valid. Yeah, it might be science and it might be mathematics, but it doesn't really matter because, oh, well, you haven't provided evidence of it. Even though it seems plausible and it seems correct, since you don't have any evidence, we can just go ahead and dismiss it. So your work doesn't mean anything. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of PhDs would love to hear that. Anyway, in spite of the fact that these idiots go and posture and say all this nonsense, whenever they're presented with the opportunity to show that they are all about free thinking and being challenged in thinking, they take the pusillanimous direction and they decide, oh, well, yeah, I could do that, or I could go and I could go and find my handbook and find the cliches that are always used in the comments section, so I can say you either don't understand, or I can say you're not progressive enough, or I can say that you're not logical enough, or I can say, oh, I can talk about ad hominems, or I can make ad hominems towards you, even though I will be the first person to ridicule you the minute you come up with one. Yeah, you idiots need to sit down, get off of YouTube first of all, and you need to reevaluate your life. And by reevaluate, I mean you need to actually have a life to evaluate first and then reevaluate it. Stop listening to people and stop following just because they say something that you like. People will always say something, and they'll always have opinions, but they won't always be right. They may very well be invalid or misinformed or very naive or pedestrian. It's your due diligence to make that determination if it's worth your time to look at it or not. If it's not worth your time, then you don't get to go and posture about being logical and reasonable. And while we're on the subject of that, you can go ahead and stop using their quote unquote jokes as well. It's one thing to be ironic, but I think we've gotten way past the point of irony being humorous and clever with all of the pasty white suburban idiots who have film degrees and have never set foot near a black person other than the 2 or 3 black friends they have. Yeah, I think we can go ahead and stop with the whole, oh, it's funny if we say nigga because we're lame white kids that don't even hang around a lot of black people. We can go ahead and stop doing that because whatever joke was there at some point, it's not there anymore. And oh, by the way, it's not funny either because it usually just precedes some picture of some animated gif of some celebrity making a response rather than actually making a clever commentary. I realize that commentary is kind of a dead thing, but what I'm trying to tell everybody here is let's get back to commentary. And with that in mind, I like to wish everybody a great day. Thanks for listening to this video, and I'll catch you again.